Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video series on the channel. Today we're going to work through just setting up your environment. So if you've never coded before or if you're new to the Python language, hopefully by the end of this video you'll have some environment where you can start writing your first line of code or maybe your first line of Python code. So the first thing you have to do is download Python on your machine. Chances are you do not have Python downloaded already, especially if you're new to programming. So in order to do that, you can just Google Python, basically download Python here. We'll go to the Python website. So here, depending on when you're watching this video, it'll have the latest version and it'll be for your operating system. So I'm on a Mac, so mine says for the Mac operating system there. So then what you want to do is click on this download and it should either immediately bring up the downloader or it should be in some place that normally downloads go on your computer. For me on a Mac, it pops up down here, so I can click on the installer. Now, I already have a Python version installed on my machine, so I'm not going to go through this, but it's safe to say that anything that is selected by default throughout this entire installation process, you can just go ahead and continue right through. So here I'm just clicking, I would normally click install here, but for you, anything that is already selected, hit default, don't worry about anything that pops up, basically like your custom settings or anything like that. So once you do this, you will now have Python on your machine, which means when you try to run Python code, you can basically have that language on your machine. So the interpreter, the Python interpreter, basically what's going to read your code and execute it, exists on your machine. So now once you've downloaded the language, the next thing you're going to need is an IDE. So what an IDE is, it's basically a nice environment where you can do your development in. So a lot of times it has the fancy color schemes and things like that. So it has a lot of nice features with it that, especially when you're just starting out, it'll help you reinforce all the things you're learning. And it has a lot of great error checking techniques and things like that. So here, we're actually going to download this thing called PyCharm. So PyCharm is developed by this company called JetBrains, and they have quite a bit of software, and they've been around for quite a while as well. So I've used PyCharm both in my free time and professionally, and I think it's a great piece of software. So again, make sure that you have your proper operating system selected here. So for me, I have a Mac, and do not fall for the blue button here. We're going to want the free community edition. So again, I already have this installed, but this should automatically open some installer for you down here, like it does on a Mac and similar to downloading Python. So now, with PyCharm, there are quite a bit of different selections that you can make throughout the installation process. And again, I recommend just using the default for everything. They probably know better than you and me for what's going to be needed just to get up and running. So once you get through all the installation process for both Python and PyCharm, then you can go ahead and open PyCharm. So it should exist somewhere in your applications folder. If you're on a Mac, it'll ask you to move it there. So once you find a way to open it, depending on where it gets put in your downloads or maybe in your applications, you could just do a search on your machine to find it. You should have something like this. And again, I'm on a Mac, so if you're on a Windows machine or Linux even, it might look a little bit different. But this is the general layout of what PyCharm gives you. So you have the option to create a new project, open a recent one, and this get from version control. If you're not familiar with Git, don't worry about it. But basically, if you're collaborating with others, that's a way to do that. So why don't we just go ahead and create a new project here. And I'm just going to call this Hello World. So now this is the path, and we're going to talk about what the path is in a future video. You can also do some Googling on your own. But this is where basically this folder for your project that you're creating will exist in your machine. So for me, this is where it exists. So I'm going to go ahead and create this. And a lot of times it'll open up like a tip of the day, or maybe if it's your first time opening it, it might have some additional things that you need to install or work through. So again, use the default and then kind of X out until you get to this screen here. So now we have our project, and you'll see it's in the top left here. It'll have everything laid out for you. And you can start off, we'll make our first program right now. You can go ahead and right click this and hit new and then Python file. So once you've done that, it'll ask you to name it, and we're going to call this Hello World. You hit enter, and then now you see you have a hello world.py. So .py is the Python file extension. So anytime you write any program in Python, you have to use that .py just so your machine knows that it's a Python file. Similar to how you have .png or .jpeg or any other file on your machine, Python has its own file extension, in which case it's .py. So now you should be ready to write your first line of Python code, and we are just going to simply print hello world, just like that. So what I have here is the print statement, an open parenthesis, a single quote, and then what I want to print to the screen, another single quote to end it, and then the end parenthesis there. So now what you'll notice here is I don't know how to run this right now, so you basically have to go up to your run, and again on Windows it might look slightly different, so go to run and then click run. It will ask you if you want to run this configuration. You can go ahead and click the hello world, and you'll see that right here we printed hello world. So hopefully that went well. If it didn't, then feel free to stay tuned for future videos. We may have some debugging on how to sort of get your PyCharm environment set up, but for any future video in this series and for a lot of the series on this channel, we will be using PyCharm just because of the user interface is pretty nice. So thank you very much, and stay tuned when we start diving in a little bit more into the Python language.